This is a Commitment 2022 special in partnership with the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, the Granite State Debates.
The economy is top of mind for Granite Staters.
It's going to be all about inflation and the cost of living right now. That's what people are talking about.
Inflation is at its highest point in 40 years. Prices are up on housing, heat, groceries, and gas. Polls show economics and inflation are the number one concern for voters. Not far behind is government spending and taxes.
How will you expand the workforce?
This is the question I get every place I go.
But there is more than money at issue for the 118th Congress. Abortion, elections, and the environment are all priorities for New Hampshire voters. Now they will choose between Democratic incumbent Annie Kuster, running for her 6th term, and Republican businessman Robert Burns, a former selectman and county treasurer. Which one has the best vision for the Granite State?
Tonight, the candidates for the 2nd Congressional District.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the Granite State Debates. I'm WMUR Political Director Adam Sexton. Tonight we are joined by the candidates for the 2nd Congressional District. They'll be answering questions from me and from our panelists. Those panelists tonight are WMUR anchors Gene Mackin and Steve Botari. Let's take a look at the format. Each candidate will get up to 60 seconds to answer questions, and then they'll get up to 30 seconds for rebuttals if necessary, and those will be granted at my discretion. Of course, at the very end of the debate, candidates will be granted 60 seconds each for closing statements. We want to jump right into the questions, and we're going to start tonight with Steve Botari.
Adam, thank you. As we enter the colder months here in New Hampshire, many Granite Staters will worry about inflation and paying their bills. Home heating oil is now at more than $5.50 a gallon. Some people's natural gas bills will soon go up more than $100 a month. One program meant to help is Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, also known as LIHEAP. Here in New Hampshire, more than 32,000 applicants are expected this year alone. That is significantly up over last year. Mr. Burns, in an interview with WMUR, you said you would get rid of LIHEAP. Would you replace it with something else? And if not, what would you say to the tens of thousands of people who get that assistance?
Well, first and foremost, LIHEAP isn't going to be canceled this year. I'm not in Congress, so we're talking about in the future. What we need to do is lower the cost of energy for everybody, not just a select few that are going to get a $500 voucher. I also don't believe in and I'm going to be saying this a lot tonight, I don't believe in sending our tax money to Washington, D.C. to go through the grift where you go to D.C. and you see people who work for our government living in million-dollar homes in the Beltway. You look at the lobbyists out there that need to get paid. We send $1 there and we're lucky to get 20 cents back. And that's what we're doing. It's insane and it makes no sense. I want to shut down every government program like that. I think that these are best handled by the states. I believe in tax exemptions and tax credits for people who are making their houses more energy efficient. I'm not against that. But in the future, and this isn't going to happen this year, this is going to happen in the future. But if we continue with the failed policies of Biden and Kuster, everybody's going to be paying more for energy in the future.
Representative Kuster, you support LIHEAP and signed a letter a few months ago asking the Appropriations Committee to spend even more on that program, which they did. Should there be a new approach, though, to help people stay warm rather than just spending more and more each year and each winter?
Well, first, thank you so much to all of you, WMUR, for having us. Absolutely. And I recently sent a letter to the president asking him to finally release the Northeast Home Heating Oil Reserve that's designed to bring down the cost of heating oil here in the Northeast. I expect that will be happening shortly. We've got to tackle the energy crisis and make sure that we're investing in energy efficiency, and I'm glad to hear my opponent welcoming that, but also clean, renewable energy. I was visiting a car dealership in Milford, New Hampshire just a few weeks ago. All new panels on the roof of their car dealership. They're not worried about the cost of home heating oil, and that's why I support renewable energy. Let's bring down the cost of the oil for this winter, and let's make sure that those in need get the LIHEAP funds that will keep them warm. I think it's cruel to have anyone not put food on the table or be able to heat their home.
Next question from Jean Mackin.
Thanks, Adam. Mr. Burns, you've said when it comes to the federal government, quote, we have to stop with all the spending, calling out earmarks, money you say was stolen from the PPP program, and what you describe as bailouts for students and corporations. But can this country simply cut the budget as a means to eliminate inflation?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we have so much in there. I mean, let's take the student loan program and how repayment and how unfair that is, and quite frankly, illegal, because it should be going through Congress. This shouldn't just be an act from the president. I mean, we're rewarding people who went to college, and we're forcing people who are working as plumbers and custodians and car repairmen, and we're forcing them to pay for these, rich, or well-off college kids and their college education. It's unfair. And a lot of people are angry about it. And plus, it depends on how you got the loan, or I just finished paying off my loans, or I'm still in college and then I don't get this. But the more we continue to print this money, the more expensive everything gets. And you bring up the PPP. I was reading an article the other day that we're not even sure about how much fraud was really there. We're talking about hundreds of millions to billions of dollars that have gone overseas to crooks and criminals because we just wanted to get out the money as fast as possible. We need to be looking at our spending, and we need to be cutting back these programs, and we need to be keeping our tax money here in the state.
And Congresswoman Custer, you said the Department of Defense is lacking in the financial tools to keep track of how Americans' tax dollars are being spent. You've been in federal office since 2013. Why then haven't you taken a more vocal role in ensuring the Pentagon budgets are being used properly?
Well, I have, and we've worked with the House Appropriations Committee, Rosa DeLauro, the chair, to make sure that we have that accounting. What I was referring to is that we need to bring down the overall costs, and I think there's fraud and waste within that Pentagon budget. I think we can make cuts, and we can lower the deficit, and that's what we were doing with the Inflation Reduction Act, when we took hundreds of billions of dollars off the deficit, and we brought down the cost of prescription medication. Finally, we're negotiating lower rates for prescription medication to give relief to seniors and to families right here in New Hampshire. We capped the out-of-pocket at $2,000 a year and the insulin at $35 a month, and we even made vaccines free, including not just COVID and flu, but the shingles vaccine that can cost hundreds of dollars out of pocket. I think we should look everywhere we can to lower costs and make life easier here in New Hampshire.
Next question from Steve Butari.
As we've been discussing, inflation is a huge concern. The cost of food, for instance, up almost 13% this September compared to last. Representative Custer, in answering our online questionnaire about inflation, you said this. I'm going to quote this back to you. Quote, I'm proud to be leading a multi-pronged approach to making everyday necessities more affordable and ensuring economic resiliency for generations to come. What specifically does that mean?
It's about bringing down the cost of food by encouraging us to buy and to produce lower cost food closer to home. Part of what's driving the cost of food is the profiteering and the price gouging by large corporations. You saw, for example, General Mills giving 200% shareholder stock backs, and people are paying $5 for a box of cereal. But right here, if we could buy food closer to home, I've been working on the Farm Bill, I will be again in the Agriculture Committee, to encourage, say for example, greens in Loudon, New Hampshire, with greenhouses that are producing greens all winter long, fresh, delicious, and cost less, and we don't have to pay to have them trucked all the way across the country. So that's what I'm referring to. It's a multi-pronged approach.
Mr. Burns, you said there's no instant solution to inflation, but one approach would be to open up more gasoline production in the U.S., and also you mentioned get back to work on the Keystone Pipeline. Do you have other ideas to reduce inflation right now?
Well, also production of diesel fuel. We haven't built a new processing plant in years, and bringing in the natural gas through shipping that currently can't come in because of the Jones Act. There's all sorts of things that we can start to be taking down energy costs. But we saw this coming, and there were a lot of things that we could have done to head this off, including like using more wood, getting people prepared to what was going to happen. But the Biden administration was in complete denial over the inflation and the oncoming economic disaster that we're heading towards right now. Every time that the gas prices would move down 10 cents, he would be on television taking a victory lap and not getting people prepared for what was going to happen, not getting people's houses prepared to become more energy efficient. They were unrealistic, and as you know, my opponent brings up here, I mean, she's been in there for 10 years. They haven't been able to take care of these problems. As she's, you know, one of the longest-serving federal legislator right now in New Hampshire, that's up for re-election right now. Things have only gotten worse, and none of these policies have worked.
Well, one thing we can do, and the governor has dragged his feet here in New Hampshire. We're woefully behind. New Hampshire has only 1% solar energy, and our neighboring states, 17% in Vermont, 20% in Massachusetts. And as a result, consumers are going to pay much less in those neighboring states. $750 less this year in Rhode Island, over $500 less in Vermont. So I'm pleased that we passed that Inflation Reduction Act that has that investment in renewable energy. We can't keep chasing oil and gas and pipelines forever.
But again, this renewable energy is a boondoggle and it's heavily subsidized. What we should have been doing for the 10 years that you've been in Congress is working on nuclear power and advancing battery technology. Yeah, I'm not with the oil and gas industry that's held back nuclear energy. They were the enemy of nuclear energy. They've paid protesters to be out there closing down nuclear power plants, but we should have been working on this 10 years ago. Now you're talking about nuclear power being in the mix, but it's a little too late.
But why is the state dragging their feet on the net metering? That's a big problem here.
Well, again, are you running for governor or Congress?
Moving on to our next topic. Congresswoman Kuster, for years the focus of many politicians has been aimed at bringing jobs and strengthening the economy in the North Country, and it's come with mixed results. Is that still the priority?
Absolutely. It's been a big priority for mine, and I'm very pleased to say we're having terrific results in the North Country. You look at a town like Littleton, Lancaster, Bethlehem. We were just up there over the weekend, and you see thriving communities. You see more housing. That's one of the biggest issues. Housing is an issue across the state. I want to make sure that we're investing in housing. We need to build 20,000 more units. And so I was pleased with the project that we have in Bethlehem, and we've got one coming in Woodstock that is incentivized by federal funding and that will increase access to housing and opportunity. But I'm very pleased with the growth in the economy, and particularly during COVID, so many people moving to the area, so many new businesses getting started. Things are really looking up, and I'm excited about that.
Mr. Burns, should economic development in the North Country be a priority for the member of Congress?
Well, I mean, right now I'm talking to people in the North Country, and it's not jobs that they need, it's workers that they need. And honestly, there's been plenty of housing there because not that long ago, housing was very inexpensive because there wasn't jobs and there weren't people there. But the biggest issue that they're having in the North Country is drug addiction. And we're not taking care of the drug addiction problem here. You know, we're creating jobs up there for people to work in rehabilitation clinics and doctors that are prescribing opioids, the same opioids that are funding my opponent's campaign. She's getting money from the big pharmaceutical companies who are handing out opioids like candy, like Oxycontin.
You have worked your entire life for the big pharma.
I've worked my entire life with quality control and safety. Do you believe that we shouldn't have quality control and safety in pharmaceutical companies? Trust me, the pharmaceutical companies don't like me. That's why they've never given me a single dollar towards my campaign, where they've given you hundreds of thousands, including the producers of generic Oxycontin and Suboxone, which now Suboxone is a $4 billion a year industry.
Congresswoman, 30 seconds.
I think we were talking about jobs in the North Country. I'm happy to talk about that. And I'm happy to talk about Suboxone. It's saving my brother's life right now. Our family has been hit, like many families have been, by the opioid epidemic. And over COVID, it's been very, very difficult. And I'm very grateful that he can have access to Suboxone, that he can get the treatment that he needs, and it's saving his life.
Next question from Gene Mackin. I'm sorry, Steve Butari.
Yeah, we're going to actually turn to this topic that we've just been discussing. Despite the billions of dollars being spent by federal, state, and local governments, the opioid crisis continues to ravage New Hampshire, with our two largest cities right now on track to forecast their highest number of deaths in years. So, Representative Kuster, are there areas where spending on this issue has been misguided? and should be diverted to other resources.
Yes, and one of the issues that I've seen being out on the campaign trail and talking to families that are coping with this is that the federal funding that came to the state was sent out by the governor through a program that he called the Doorways. But the problem with the Doorways is they're only open literally from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And trust me when I say overdoses and people needing treatment are much more likely to happen from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. What we need is 24 access to care so that when people have that moment of clarity, that brief moment of opportunity when they're willing to get the help that they need, that they immediately get access to detox and that they get into a treatment program that works for them, that deals with the co-occurring illness of mental health and substance use disorder, and that they have long-term recovery, including recovery housing. So we can do better, and I think we will.
And Mr. Burns, with the billions being spent here on the opioid crisis, are there areas that you see where the spending on this issue is misguided and should be put elsewhere?
Well, listen, clearly what we're doing isn't working. In 2005, my brother was murdered. But I blame largely the opioid crisis and his addictions. And one of the drugs that I saw that was absolutely ruining here was the way that doctors were handing out opioids like Suboxone. And so it used to be that you would go to a methadone clinic, you get your methadone in the morning and you'd go to work. Then we had doctors coming here and giving out 30-day scripts for Suboxone so that my brother was able to use the Suboxone on a weekday and party on the weekends. And this is what we saw, abuse. And this is why the manufacturer of Suboxone was actually sued by the Justice Department in a tune of $1.4 billion because they were making unclinically supported claims. I'm not against Suboxone completely. I do believe it has a place in the mix. But the way that it's being used is abused. And when you have pharmaceutical companies making billions of dollars off of just moving one addiction to another, it's clearly not working. The science and the statistics are there that it's been a failed program. And what we're doing isn't working. I have a lot of different ideas, like we should only be giving money to drug rehabilitation clinics that have lower recidivism rates. Thank you, Adam.
That's time. Next question from Gene Mackin.
All right, thanks, Adam. There are a lot of political ads on TV right now that can make figuring out a candidate's position on abortion very difficult. This issue, though, is consistently among the top 3 most important for voters. Mr. Burns, please be clear. Would you vote to pass a national ban on abortion once a heartbeat is detected? Would there be any exceptions? And would there be criminal penalties for a mother or providers?
So I originally said 12 weeks when I was on here. We've also talked about the Democrat Joe Manchin bill, which is 15 weeks. I said I would vote for both of those. I've always said an exception for the life of the mother. I was misquoted when we had talked about something and I was talking about affecting the lifestyle or the mental health of the mother for late-term abortions. Never about the life of the mother. I've always been clear on that. My opponent has now come out, thankfully, in talking about viability at least 20 to 24 weeks, which I'm glad that we're moving closer to the center on this one. And also my opponent has brought up that she believes in parental consent, which I agree with her on. So I think that we're not that far off. Listen, I'm pro-life and I'm unapologetic for it. And I realize that there's the clip that say, would you vote to be pro-life or whatever it says. But then I say, or ban abortion. And I say, yes. But realistically, we know that's not going to happen. And I've always had exceptions for the life of the mother in there. I've never said anything altered to that.
All right, and quickly, any criminal penalties for a mother or
No,
provider?
I've never said criminal penalties.
All right, let's move on to you, Congresswoman Custer, and you can respond to that. We do want to ask you, you voted for the Women's Health Protection Act, which critics say would have allowed unrestricted abortion nationwide, going far beyond Roe v. Wade. So based on your vote, should Granite Staters assume your position is to have no restrictions on abortion at any time during a pregnancy?
The Women's Health Protection Act is the codification of Roe v. Wade. So I feel very strongly about this issue. I've been an adoption attorney for 25 years. And what I believe is that we need less government interference in people's personal private lives. And 3 out of 4 voters in New Hampshire agree with me. And that's why Mr. Burns is attempting to change his position tonight. So let me be very clear, because we've studied the record. For years, Mr. Burns has described himself as 100% pro-life at conception. That is the bill that will be voted in Congress, Life at Conception Act, if Mr. Burns is elected and if the Republicans take the House. There are 80% of the Republicans already co-sponsoring that bill. He said not once, but twice and 3 times during the primary that the bill that he supported would criminalize abortion before most women even know they're pregnant. And it's an inconvenient truth for him to use the word criminalize. That's exactly what it does. It's penalties putting doctors and women in jail.
Well, of course, that's completely untrue. And I've always said...
That's precisely what the bill does.
That is precisely
what the bill does. You have not said 12 weeks.
This is absolute fear-mongering that you're doing. Absolute fear-mongering.
Today, your website today.
I have been very specific on here with Adam multiple times.
Congresswoman, let's let him have his rebuttal. 30 seconds.
I've been absolutely specific with Adam on here multiple times.
During your debate, 3 times you talked
about... Yes, I did. And 3 times we brought up specifically 12 weeks. It's funny, your first attack ad commercial... This is what I said, though. I don't know what bill you're talking about.
The bill there
is no specific bill on my website, Ann.
Absolutely.
So can I get my 30 seconds eventually?
Let's let him have 30 seconds uninterrupted to respond.
So listen, you can go to my website. There's nothing about a specific bill. It does say fetal heartbeat. We were very specific during the first debate that was 12 weeks. Okay,
it's 6 weeks.
Are you writing this legislation? You know, you also told me I was going to get $500 million in out-of-state spending, and I never got any of that money, not a single dollar. And you said I was going to be on stage with Donald Trump this week, and that never happened either.
You probably will on Monday.
What's that?
You probably will on Monday.
Okay, I don't know where you get your information.
Let's let him reply on abortion for 20 more seconds.
Again,
uninterrupted.
I've been very specific about this. Even her first commercial said 12 weeks. There's been tens of millions, I think about $10 million of out-of-state spending in here against me alone, but against hundreds of millions across the country of distorting people's records and what they're actually saying. Most Americans do believe in abortion, but abortion with restrictions. My opponent has been very confusing about where she stands on that at times. Thank you.
Quickly, Congresswoman, and then we're going to move on. 15 seconds.
My position is very clear. I support Roe v. Wade and the standard that's been the law of the land for 50 years, and it should be the standard going forward.
Next question from Jean Mackin.
All right, thanks, Adam. All right, next topic. Earlier this fall, a plane load of 50 migrants from a shelter in San Antonio, Texas, landed on Martha's Vineyard on flights paid for by Florida's governor. If you are in office and a governor from another state sends a plane full of migrants to Nashua, what steps would you take? And this time you'll go first, Mr. Burns.
Yeah, I'd sue them. It was absolutely terrible what they did. I think it was stupid. It's just dumb.
We agree.
And that's the best thing that I can say about it.
Congresswoman?
We agree.
All right, thank you.
Next question coming from Steve Bottari.
The U.S. imposed what were described at the time as crippling sanctions on Russia when the invasion of Ukraine started. But the New York Times just reported that Russia's international trade is actually booming at this point, particularly with China, strengthening ties now between 2 autocratic countries. So what changes, if any, should be made in Congress to make sanctions a regime that may not be producing the intended results? How do we make those tougher? Representative Custer.
Well, that was an important revelation in that report, and I want to make sure that we tackle that we take that on. The Treasury Department is in charge of this, and we want to make sure that the oligarchs and the people that own the big ships and all of the property all over the world, that we crack down on that. And I think we have been doing that, but it sounds like we need to do better, and I think we will.
Mr. Burns?
So I think we'd go after China, but the thing is I want to go after China anyway. I got into this race talking about pharmaceutical manufacturing and how we're moving all our critical pharma manufacturing to India. Ultimately, 90% of our API is now being produced in China. We're seeing supply chain issues. I have people emailing me today that they can't get their cancer medications. We're talking about a shortage of amoxicillin. We're seeing Indian pharmaceutical companies send straight up poison over to Africa because they don't care about the people that are there if they can make a buck. And I don't want those types of people selling here. But specifically in China, we need more sanctions against China, but we need them for slave labor. We need them for dumping bad drugs on us. We need them for the human rights violations, the pollution that they're doing. And then, yeah, we can throw on top of it, maybe we'll actually do something about it because of their close relationship with Russia. But listen, I would warn Russia to not trust China. The more that they rely on a country like China, the more that they are then beckoned to China, and China is controlling their country.
Next question from Gene Mackin.
So we talked about sanctions. Now let's talk about aid. The U.S. has spent more than $18 billion helping Ukraine, while America is dealing with inflation and skyrocketing costs for basic necessities here at home. How much more should the U.S. spend on helping Ukraine, and how do you explain spending money there while Granite Staters are struggling? Mr. Burns.
Yeah, well, I don't agree with most of the aid that we've been sending there. Listen, I'm not heartless, as much as you may have heard the commercials about what a terrible human being I am. Constantly, you've probably heard about 30 of them tonight. I believe in food and medical aid, but that's it. We're sending weapons over there that we don't know where it's going. We're sending cash that we don't know where it's going. This is the time for Europe to step up. We've got issues over here. We've got issues with inflation. We have issues with narco-terrorism, MS-13. And obviously, I do believe that our largest existential threat is China that we need to be worried about.
Congresswoman Custer?
Well, I believe in democracy. That's why I'm wearing my Ukraine flag and my American flag. I believe in democracy here, and I believe in supporting the Ukraine people who are fighting so hard for democracy there. This was an unprovoked attack by Vladimir Putin, and we need to stand up for democracy. I don't think we need boots on the ground. I've drawn the line very clearly there about American troops, but I do believe that we should continue to send the Stinger missiles, the various types of arms that we have sent, and I would increase the use of drones. I think our intelligence can be very helpful in stopping the Putin assault. And if we don't stand up for democracy in Ukraine, then we'll be invoking the NATO treaty, and it'll be marching all the way across Europe. And I think I study a lot about World War II. My father was a pilot in World War II. And I think we need to stand up for democracy again. That's what this moment is all about.
Next question from Steve Botari.
In the wake of the Supreme Court Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, there's some concern now that federal protections for same-sex marriage could be challenged next. Mr. Burns, would you support federal legislation guaranteeing protections for same-sex marriage? And if not, how should the country handle a situation in which marriage could be recognized in one state but then not another?
Well, so personally, I think no government should be recognizing marriage. I don't believe that the government should regulate marriage at all, both federal and local. That's my personal belief.
Representative Custer, do you think this is something Congress even needs to weigh in on? And then beyond abortion rights, are there other protections you think are now necessary in the wake of the Dobbs decision?
Absolutely. And I know my opponent is opposed to marriage equality. I am a strong proponent of marriage equality. I think that I believe that people should love the one they love, and marriage is a commitment that's very important. I've been married myself for 36 years, and it's the best decision I ever made. And I want to support those who make that decision, make that commitment to children, to families. I believe in it, and I believe very strongly. So I voted for the Marriage Equality Act. I hope that Congress will pass it. I think it'd be a terrible thing, and I know there are many people watching tonight who have loved ones, maybe a member of their family or a close personal friend, who relies on marriage equality for their security and to care for their family. So I feel very, very strongly about this one. And again, it's a big difference between us.
Mr. Burns, you were invoked. 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. I don't believe that the government should be involved in marriage. I don't think that it should be a business agreement. I don't think that we should have tax exemptions for people getting married or not, incentives to get married or not. That's what I don't believe in. That's not being against marriage equality. That's being against the government getting involved in people's lives.
Your position is opposed to marriage equality.
That's being against people getting involved in people's personal lives. I mean, the thing is this is just more fear-mongering to take away the attention from inflation, really. I mean, this is all they have is to talk about social issues, but not talking about heating costs. We're not talking about inflation. We're not talking about 87,000 IRS agents that are going to come storming down your door to audit you and possibly shoot you. You want to talk about social issues and scare people into thinking that all of a sudden, they're going to be raped and forced to carry a child, that their marriages are going to be broken up by the federal government, and you know that's not going to happen. You know this is all about fear. And Halloween is over.
30 seconds, Congresswoman Custer, and we'll move on.
I stand by, I believe in marriage equality, and I think you've gone too far down the Fox rabbit hole on that one.
Next question from Gene Mackin.
According to the Census Bureau's most recent pulse survey in October, it's estimated that 28% of adults in New Hampshire who've had COVID-19 have had symptoms lasting 3 months or longer. At this point in the pandemic, what role should the federal government play in helping people with long COVID? Congresswoman Custer.
Well, this is a personal issue for me. One of my nieces has long COVID since March of 2020. She used to literally be on the United States ski team, and now she has to choose between cooking dinner or washing her hair. It's a real tragedy, and I've been in very close touch with many families who have someone in their family that they care for and they love who is dealing with long COVID. We are doing research, and I've invested, our committee, the Health Subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee, has invested in research at the NIH on long COVID so that we understand the connection. It seems to have to do with the immune system and people's ability to respond. And I think it's critically important. It's tens of thousands of people, and right now workforce is one of the biggest issues here in New Hampshire. I want to make sure people are well enough to be able to work and care for their families.
And Mr. Burns, what role should the federal government play in helping people with long COVID?
Well, listen, we have corporations called pharmaceutical companies that are heavily, obviously, supporting my opponent here, that are more than willing to create new drugs and remedies for people with things like long COVID. That's what they do. They cure stuff sometimes. Sometimes they make your life a little bit better. Sometimes they make your life a little bit worse when they're prescribing too many opioids out there. So, but we have pharmaceutical companies that are more than willing to do this, that get paid very well to do stuff like this. And this clearly isn't just a problem in the United States. It's a worldwide problem. And they will come up with solutions. But what we don't need is government constantly hampering back pharmaceutical companies, particularly when they're doing research, like what happened with Moderna. Moderna actually had their vaccine ready to go, but because of woke policy, they were told that they needed to go back and find more minorities to test on. Now, Pfizer wasn't held to that same level of testing, and they were actually able to release their drug first. And I have to wonder, when you look at the amount of money Pfizer has given to politicians, and that, of course, the former FDA director was working as a essentially lobbyist for Pfizer, whether they were held back for political or financial reasons.
All right, let's shake things up a little bit with a lightning round. These are quick answers, 15 seconds each, candidates. All right, a few of these. Congresswoman Custer, this is a border district, of course. What is New Hampshire's most important export to Canada, in your opinion?
I would say our tourism. I'm stuck because it's not an export, but much of our tourism comes from Canada, and I support that, and that's why I asked the president to reopen the border during COVID, and eventually that happened.
Mr. Burns.
I suppose it could be tourism the other way, though, because I'm trying to think of what we really export to Canada. They don't buy our maple syrup, even though it's better than theirs, but they keep claiming it's not. Like, Canadians can be like that at times, but it probably is exporting our tourists up there. I mean, you know, if you go onto a Saturday night on St. Catherine Street, you're going to find tons of college kids up there that are under the age of 21.
Believe it or not, it's aviation parts.
There we go.
Okay, Mr. Burns, the 2nd District is geographically sprawling by New Hampshire standards. Be honest, for you, where's the easiest place to get lost in CD2?
The easiest place to get lost? You know, for me, it's that kind of portion of western New Hampshire around like Charlestown. Because there's no easy way sometimes to drive out there. Like if you go on 89, but then sometimes you can end up on some back roads and you find these like farms and that you're on very dark roads that are twisty and turny, which can be kind of nice in my sport truck. But that's where I kind of get lost a little bit, like out in that western area.
Beautiful country. Congresswoman Custer, where's the easiest place to get lost in CD2?
I'd say we took a drive from Manchester to Claremont without getting on a highway, and we didn't get lost, but it was certainly back roads.
Congresswoman Custer, we've been asking about congressional term limits in these debates for decades, and nothing has happened. Do you think that's because it's too difficult to get a constitutional amendment up and running, or because incumbents don't want to vote against their own self-interest?
I think it's probably the former. I think it's not that easy to do a constitutional amendment. But it's something that is discussed and should be discussed.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people don't want to vote against their own self-interest once they're there, and then as a congressman, they can kind of slip into into the nethers with everybody else, and no one's really paying attention to them. The senators obviously always get a lot more attention than the congressmen do.
Been a bit of a driving theme here. Mr. Burns, when was the last time you got a traffic ticket and what was the infraction?
It was probably driving with a, without registering my car in like Londonderry. It was probably like 1 point, like $50. I remember something like
Congressman
that.
Custer, how about you?
I have not had a ticket in a very, very long time.
Right.
When I first started dating my husband, I do remember going through a flashing red light in an intersection in Concord there.
All right. Last one here. Congresswoman Custer and Mr. Burns, you're both graduates of New Hampshire-based higher education institutions. If you had to go back to college or university in the Granite State but couldn't attend your alma mater, which school would you choose?
Oh, that's interesting. Probably the University.
Of?
New Hampshire.
Oh, UNH, okay. And
I'd go to Dartmouth.
all right. Okay. Let's
you.
get back in the mix here. And it looks like, believe it or not, you're stuck with me again for another question. All right. Mr. Burns, do you believe the January 6th insurrectionists and rioters are being treated fairly by the justice system?
Well, I think there's a lot that aren't. And I mean, there's a lot that vandalize stuff that probably are. But I think that there's a lot of people that have been investigated who were never even there. Quite frankly, you say that they were rioters. There were people that were miles away in Washington, D.C. that have had their phone records, their bank records, without due process looked into. I mean, this is a total suspension of justice.
Congresswoman Custer?
Well, Adam, as you know, more than most, I was a witness, a victim, and a survivor of the attack on our Capitol on January 6, 2021. And I think that the sentences are now coming down are absolutely appropriate. Seditious attempts to overturn our government. Look, I've now seen the video footage of the hallway where I made my escape, and 30 seconds after I was on that elevator, there were insurrectionists with backpacks hunting us down. And, you know, I could have been killed. The members that I was with could have been killed. And if that had happened, just 30 seconds, you all wouldn't have woken up in the morning to the President of the United States being determined lawfully. And I think our country would have been in a very, very dark place.
Next question from Steve Botari.
Representative Custer, are there any federal taxes right now that are too high? If so, what are they? And how would you bring them down and offset any revenue loss?
Well, I'll tell you, the taxes that are not too high are the taxes on Amazon that pays nothing, and the millionaires and billionaires that got the tax cut under President Trump that added $2 trillion to our deficit. My opponent loves to talk about the deficit, but he doesn't seem to do the math that it was taxes on millionaires and billionaires that really started driving the deficit up. So I want to make sure that these corporations pay their full and fair share of taxes, and that's why I voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, to make sure that that happens.
And to be clear, in the remaining time, are there any federal taxes right now that are too high?
Not against people over $400,000, absolutely not, but perhaps for people lower than that, yes.
Mr. Burns, you've been critical of increased funding for the IRS that was part of the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act. But with more employees nearing retirement age at the IRS and millions of tax returns already going unprocessed, what other options would you support to make sure that Americans know they can trust the system and others don't cheat it?
Well, fair tax or flat tax would do that. And it's interesting, when Obama became president in 2008, he actually said that he wouldn't be opposed to either and wanted to look into them. But then once they realized that they could weaponize the IRS against the Republican Party, that idea got shot down and left by the wayside. We don't need to collect taxes the way we do. It's totally inefficient. You know, either having a national sales tax like the fair tax or a flat tax where you fill out one postcard. The problem is, and what Ann Custer's talking about here, is that, yeah, a lot of millionaires and billionaires and these corporate guys aren't paying taxes, and they have armies of lawyers to make sure that they're not doing it. Not only do they have armies of lawyers, but they have armies of lobbyists that are, of course, giving my opponent hundreds of thousands of dollars and funding her campaign. So I find it a little disingenuous when she talks about these millionaires and billionaires and these corporate PACs that are paying for her campaign. Now, she's going to talk about how the corporate PACs are funded by the employees. I went through one of those corporate PACs the other day, Viatris, the people who were making OxyContin, and everybody there was either like a vice president, a PR, or they were the lobbyist on retainer.
Congresswoman, 30 seconds.
No comment.
Next question from Gene Mackin.
The presence of dangerous cancer-causing chemicals known as PFAS, or so-called forever chemicals, have been located in more Granite State communities, from drinking water to soil. Our neighbors in Maine have a first-in-the-country ban of products containing PFAS that will be taking effect in January, should the federal government ban the use of PFAS in all U.S. manufacturing. Congresswoman, you first.
Well, this is an issue I've been working on. We have a PFAS working group that's bipartisan, and we're tackling that issue. And I want to thank, actually, the people here in New Hampshire who have been such vocal critics and have been such great advocates on this issue. We need to rid our country of these forever chemicals. I have legislation that would ban the future use of PFAS chemicals so that we don't add to the problem that we already had. So yes, my answer is yes.
And Mr. Burns?
Yeah, absolutely. But we need to go beyond that. We need to make sure that the countries that we're dealing with also don't use these dangerous chemicals in their processes and dumping them into the water. Because as you say, they're a forever chemical. They're ending up in the same water that we're drinking. They're killing the same rivers. They're killing the same fish. You know, I've been criticized actually multiple times for how much I bring up fish here for some reason, but it is something that's close to my heart is our lakes, our rivers, our oceans. I'm an avid fisherman. You know, obviously we've always been concerned about mercury in the past, and no, nobody wants this sort of stuff in their drinking water, in their food, in their oceans, in their streams and lakes. I think that's something that we all agree on, but at the same time, we need to hold other countries responsible as well.
Next question coming from over here at the moderator's desk. New Hampshire's mental health system continues to struggle to meet the demand for services. What legislation, if any, would you support to increase or expedite the training and hiring of mental health professionals, or is this the state's responsibility, Mr.
Well, again,
Burns?
I think a lot of this stuff is on the state. You know, it's not even just with mental health, but, you know, children with disabilities. You know, I went to some forums the other day on that and got to learn a lot. But I think that the state is the best to deal with it and to figure out. But, you know, to talk more about mental health, something I was talking about in the primary that we haven't brought up much, you need to be 21 years old to buy a cigarette in this state now. But any 12-year-old can sit for 6, 7, 8 hours a day on TikTok and social media. The constant stream, and quite frankly, even your commercials and the fear-mongering that they're doing, is what's contributing to this mental health issue that we have. It's the constant stream of TikTok. It's the constant stream of, you know, body image problems that girls are having, or people that and boys, let's face it. In this constant stream of all this money that people think that they have, these kids out there that pretend that they have Ferraris on TikTok, but they don't really. But it's causing a lot of these mental health issues, and we should be regulating how much children are on all of these networks and streams and social media accounts, because this is causing the problems.
Congresswoman, what legislation would you support to increase or expedite the training of mental health professionals in New Hampshire?
Well, I've been a big proponent of funding for our community mental health centers, not just in terms of bricks and mortar, that's critically important, but also, as you say, in training and making sure that we build the workforce. One of the bare silver linings that we've had out of the opioid epidemic is that many people who have gotten the treatment that they need and gotten both the mental health and substance abuse treatment so that they are back in the workforce have chosen to go into this field. And I think that's a really important new development. Another piece of this I want to talk about is immigration, actually, because we just recently successfully encouraged the Northern Borders Regional Commission to process a program for J-1 visas for physicians in the North Country. The North Country hospitals were having a terrible time recruiting physicians, and this will help with recruitment and retention. I want to expand that, and I've already been talking with colleagues about how to expand that next session so that that could include other types of healthcare professionals, including mental health.
Next question from Gene Mackin.
President Joe Biden has said that his administration is reevaluating certain aspects of federal marijuana policy. What changes, if any, should the next Congress make to laws regarding cannabis? Congresswoman Custer.
Well, I have supported the decriminalization, and I believe that we should have more research to understand fully the impacts, but I don't think that anyone should, go to jail for long periods of time for small amounts and small use. But I'm comfortable having that decision at the state level. I think here in New Hampshire, the legislature has discussed this. Obviously, we have medical marijuana, but the decriminalization and descheduling so that it's not a federal crime is what's most important.
Mr. Burns?
Okay, so first off, it's a Schedule 1 drug right now, which means it's completely illegal, whereas cocaine's even a Schedule 2 drug because it's used in certain surgeries. So anything that we talk about on state levels of being decriminalized, this and that, that's all, it's word salad and doesn't really make sense. So right now it's federally illegal, even if you were to get it medicinally. So it definitely needs to either be lowered down in the schedule or descheduled. Right now it probably needs to be descheduled because we have a number of states that are selling it recreationally, and it is technically against the federal law, and it's kind of puts us in this really bad situation. The other bad situation that we're in right now is it's not regulated by the FDA, and I know there's going to be some libertarians that don't like what I'm about to say, but a lot of the candies that are out there that are being sold in places like Massachusetts, gummy bears and things, they are attracting children, they are eating them. There was actually a child that died recently from overconsumption of cannabinoids. When you look at some states, you can only sell like dark chocolates, things like that. If the FDA had regulation over it, they wouldn't be able to market to kids in these states. I don't know why Massachusetts allows it. And I thought it was a terrible idea when people proposed that we would sell cannabis at New Hampshire state liquor stores. I don't think that those are two drugs that we should be encouraging people to mix together.
Next question from Steve Botari.
Adam, thank you. Social media has given the average citizen a louder voice in the public sphere at this point. The White House says it works with platforms like Facebook to filter what it considers misinformation. At one point that is proposing what they called a disinformation governance board. Mr. Burns, is it appropriate for the federal government to be part of deciding what people are allowed to see or not see and say on private platforms?
No, absolutely not. And I mean, we talked about this with disinformation with vaccines. I mean, on New Hampshire Close-Up, my opponent went on there and gave disinformation about the vaccine. She said that if you take the vaccine, you will not get sick and you will not die, thus indicating that it was 100% effective. Where would we live in a world where she clearly made a mistake when she said something so ridiculous that then all of a sudden that she could be sued or go to jail because the disinformation, what gulag goes after her? That's scary. No, I'm sorry. We have the First Amendment. Whether you're right or wrong, we have the right to say things.
Representative Custer, is it appropriate for the federal government to be part of deciding what people see and say on private platforms?
Only if it's violent, and I think part of the discussion really has to do with the violent speech. There was a study that just came out today, actually. 9 out of 10 Americans believe that there will be political violence. And we've had the FBI. By the way, I was so surprised when my opponent wants to defund the FBI. I believe in the police, I believe in the FBI, and I think that they can keep us safe. But I am concerned about the violent rhetoric and the threats that are online. And I think, we need to tone down the rhetoric, and we need to hold these companies accountable for the type of violence that is being encouraged and, in fact, planned online.
Okay, listen, I've gotten a lot of hate-filled emails because of, quite frankly, misleading, false, and just constant rhetoric, fear-mongering from your campaign in your corporate, your corporate benefactors that have just put up $10 million attacking me, and then you're talking about that we need to tone down the rhetoric. That's really rich coming from you.
Congresswoman, response?
No comment.
Next question from Gene Mackin.
New Hampshire has one of the country's highest rates of student debt, and tuition at UNH costs more than at many prestigious public schools in America. So which is more important, to control the cost of tuition at public universities, to help Granite Staters pay for college, or to wipe out debt? Congresswoman.
Well, for the people who already have the debt, and by the way, many of these people did not get the value of their education. Either they were led down a path that wasn't successful, they weren't able to complete the studies, or the studies didn't get the value, and that's what the $10,000 relieving of debt is about. But I agree we need to do more to help families, and again, not just college, but apprenticeships. I do a lot of work with unions, and I think that union apprenticeships have tremendous value for young people here in New Hampshire, and we should support them. We should support the choices that young people make to do internships and to get life experience. Look, we need workforce in this state. We have 1,000 openings at Fidelity, 800 at BAE, 1,200 at Dartmouth Health. We need to do everything we can to prepare the workforce for the next generation.
Mr. Burns?
Well, obviously, I mean, dumping more federal money and giving out more loans only increased the cost of college education. And we've seen a number of these college professors out there that we hear about, like Elizabeth Warren, who make $1 million for giving 1 or 2 classes. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. That's what's gone to the cost. I mean, I went and spoke at Dartmouth, and one of the students there asked me what I was going to do about lowering their cost of education. I said, if you don't feel like you're getting the value of this cost of education, then you should go somewhere else, or that you should change your major and go into something else. We should only be giving out loans like a business. Giving out loans to people who are getting educated in a field at a college where they're able to make that money back and pay that loan. College should only cost what the value of it is. And by pumping more government money into it, we've created colleges that have no value. And quite frankly, not as many people need to have a 4-year education. I mean, people do need to do internships. People do need to go, into other fields, associate's degrees and stuff like that. So yeah.
Next question from Steve Botari.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers have periodically set up immigration checkpoints on New Hampshire highways where agents then stop cars. They have said the operations are a vital tool for national security efforts. Mr. Burns, should this be standard procedure, or do you have concerns about civil liberties?
Oh, I have absolutely. It's 200 miles, right? Is that what you said? Sorry.
I didn't specify the number.
It's like
Usually
100
miles to the
I think
border.
it's absolutely ridiculous. No, I mean, we should be stopping people at the border. The amount that they can go out, I think, is way too far. They should be at the border. You know, I agree in maybe coming up with how much of the border, if you see somebody go over the border and you're in hot pursuit, but stopping somebody 100 miles away, I think is absolutely ridiculous.
And Representative Custer?
I totally agree. I was in North Woodstock and was pulled over, and dogs and Border Patrol and everything else. I think it was intimidating to tourists that are in our state, and we want to make sure that they're here to enjoy the natural beauty. It's a big, big part of our economy. Number 2 to manufacturing, and I want to make sure people feel kindly welcome here in New Hampshire.
Next question from Gene Mackin.
All right, when it comes to Social Security, Americans aren't just concerned about the system being there when they're ready to retire, but also that the benefits remain meaningful enough for them to rely on in the later years. What will you do to ensure the system can continue to pay those benefits for the next generation of retirees? Congresswoman Custer.
Well, this one is easy. All you need to do is lift the cap on withholding. I've supported this in every election, and I believe that's the way to create a sustainable process. Look, the Republicans in Washington have made it their goal to cut Social Security benefits and Medicare. Luckily, for the people who are dealing with inflation right here in New Hampshire, the Social Security amount is actually going up 8%. And these people are living on fixed income, many of them. My own mother-in-law lived on fixed income on Social Security, and it's very challenging. So I'm opposed to cutting Social Security, and I will fight very, very hard for seniors and to make sure that those benefits that they earned, the money was deducted from their paychecks, will be there for them.
And your thoughts, Mr. Burns?
I've been very clear that I oppose making any changes to Social Security, unlike the lies that you hear from the commercials on television, which never say specifically me, but other Republicans who I've never met, I've never gotten a dollar from, have come out against Social Security. I don't believe that we should be making any changes, but the way that we fund Social Security is get more people working. And I've talked about this. We have people with drug addictions that aren't working because they're in drug treatment programs. They can't get to work because we don't have public transportation in this state. We have people with disabilities, people with PTSD that can't go to work because they're told if they work too much, then they're going to lose all their benefits. We need to stop doing that. We need to stop threatening people with disabilities that if they go out and get a job for 6 months or a year, that all of a sudden all their benefits, including their housing, is going to be gone. You know, maybe they'll pay a little bit extra back to their benefits when they start making too much money, but we need to be having every person out there working. We have millions of people out there right now in the United States that aren't working. We need to be putting people in prisons to work. And I don't mean slave labor. I mean, you know, getting on the phones, doing tech support, what have you, and being paid a fair wage.
Now to our final question, candidates. Congresswoman Kuster, if the House flips Republican, how can you be effective?
By working across the aisle, and that's what I've been doing. When I went to Congress, I promised a new approach, and that's exactly what I've done, is bring people together to get the job done. The best example is starting the bipartisan task force on mental health and addiction with Frank Ginta when he was in Congress. I also have a bipartisan task force to end sexual violence that I work on with Representative Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, and we even have a bipartisan ski and snowboard caucus with John Curtis from Utah, and we work on immigration and climate. We didn't talk much about climate, but it's critically important to the ski industry and to tourism here in New Hampshire, and we need to invest in renewable energy, and that's something that we can work on together.
Mr. Burns, how would you be prepared to deal with a divided House and Senate?
Well, I'm a really nice guy, and people find me amusing. But there are issues that I'd like to work on with Democrats. I think I'm the only Republican right now running, and quite frankly, the only person up on this stage that believes in Medicare for all. I believe that we're the type of country that we can offer health care to everybody at a lower cost. Right now, 60–70% of people are on some sort of government-assisted or fully funded health care. It's the people in the middle class who are paying for everybody else and then wondering why they don't have health care. We should have health care for all. No child should be without health care. I do believe in working towards a single-payer system, but with caveats. Nothing is 100% free. You know, I want to bring particularly like cancer testing. I want to take it away from being a political football when we talk about women's health and saying that we need to continue to fund Planned Parenthood. We need to bring that back to the hospitals, to the doctors, and we need to make that accessible to everybody, like $5 to go in to get a breast exam or a pap smear. Everybody should have very cheap access to health care, starting with the critical preventative health care and then moving towards something, but make it make sense.
We've reached the point of the debate where it's time for closing statements, 60 seconds each, and first is Mr. Burns.
So I think in my closing, I think one of the most important things that you can analyze between me and my opponent is how much corporate PAC money she's taking, how she's bought out by the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industries, how you see $10 million in attack ads against me. She is spending more tonight on commercials than I spent in my entire campaign. I spent about $200,000. There's going to be about $10 million spent against me. If you vote for me, it's a vote for democracy. It's a poke in the eye to the lawyers, the lobbyists, the grifters in D.C. and the Beltway. It's a poke into the eye to the corporate thugs out there, the corporate PACs, and the crony capitalism that's happening in this country. It's a win for democracy and the American people.
Closing statement to Congresswoman Kuster, 60 seconds.
Thank you, Adam. And again, thank you to WMUR and to the Institute of Politics. This election is about freedom and security. It's about the freedom to send your child off to school knowing that they will come home alive. It's about the freedom to have safe, affordable housing and to have energy that will save our planet rather than risk our future. It's about making sure that you and your family will be safe in your homes and that you have law enforcement on your side. And it's about those personal, private freedoms to make your own private healthcare decisions. So our democracy is on the line. On November 8th, I ask for your vote. And I thank you for standing up for freedom and security and for everyone in New Hampshire.
Okay, we've reached the end of the Granite State debates. The election is coming up quickly, and WMUR has all the resources you need to be prepared. You'll find this full debate posted on our digital platforms, as well as more information about the candidates and where they stand on the issues. You'll also find links with information about voter registration and where to find your polling place on Election Day. We want to say thank you to the candidates. Thank you, of course, to the panelists for a week of great questions. And thank you all at home for watching us. Remember to get out and vote on Election Day. Good night.